Gold is supposed to belong to kings, to palaces, pyramids, and empires whose names we still remember. But some of the oldest known worked gold did not come from Egypt or Mesopotamia. It came from the Bulgarian coast near Varna, buried in graves older than written history. And the real shock is not just its age. It is what the graves reveal. In one small stretch of land, thousands of gold objects were placed into just a handful of burials, while most graves received almost nothing. So the real mystery is not how these people worked gold. It is why one of the earliest great concentrations of gold wealth appeared here, in Bulgaria, so early. The story begins in 1972, not in a temple, but in an industrial zone. During construction work near Varna Lake, workers uncovered ancient objects, including gold, in a place where no one expected a prehistoric cemetery. Sources differ on the exact month. Some point to October, others to late autumn. But the year is certain, 1972. What followed was not a single dramatic discovery, but nearly 2 decades of excavation. From the early 1970s to 1991, archaeologists uncovered a cemetery with hundreds of graves and a concentration of gold unlike anything known from the same period. The objects now associated with Varna, beads, plaques, rings, and symbolic forms, became an archaeological sensation because they challenged the traditional story of early civilization. They were too early, too numerous, and too unevenly distributed to be dismissed as simple decoration. To call something the oldest, archaeologists have to define the category. Here, the strongest claim is not about a single stray bead somewhere on Earth. It's about a well-dated, large assemblage of worked gold associated with a cemetery. Gold that was intentionally crafted and ritually deposited. Scientific dating centers on radiocarbon measurements of human remains and associated contexts. A key set of AMS radiocarbon dates places the cemetery's use broadly in the mid-5th millennium BCE, often reported around 4600 to 4400 BCE, with modeling suggesting a relatively short period of use, on the order of a century or two. Even the dating work has a twist. Researchers explicitly considered whether eating fish from nearby waters could skew human bone radiocarbon ages via a reservoir effect, and reported a low probability of a substantial offset in their sample comparisons. So when we say oldest, we're really saying oldest major scientifically dated concentration of crafted gold, a benchmark that Bulgaria unexpectedly holds. Now the evidence, the reason Varna matters. Archaeological summaries consistently describe more than 3,000 gold objects linked to the cemetery complex, with total gold weight commonly reported a little over 6 kilograms. Some sources specify about 6.5 kilograms. This exact number varies by cataloging method and publication, so treat totals as approximate, but the scale is undeniable. What's even more important than the totals is the distribution. Gold was not shared evenly across the cemetery. In one museum summary, gold appears in only 62 burial complexes, and just 4 graves account for more than 5 kilograms of the gold, an extreme concentration of prestigious material in a tiny social slice. That pattern is why Varna is often discussed as an early, clear archaeological signal of social hierarchy. Some individuals, or symbolic graves representing individuals, were treated as elites, marked with objects that were not merely decorative, but socially powerful. And it wasn't just gold. Burials included copper tools and prestige items, fine stone, and other materials that point to long-distance connections and specialized craft. So when you stand before the gold, what you're really looking at is an early social system using metal as a language of power. So why here? Why does the earliest gold wealth, at scale, appear on this coast? The strongest explanation isn't mystical. It's economic, and it starts with salt. In later prehistory, salt is survival. Humans and domestic animals require it, and communities without local access must trade for it. One archaeological synthesis argues that salt near the Varna Lakes region was a uniquely important strategic resource in a wider landscape otherwise poor in key raw materials. So salt became not only a trade driver, but a kind of general equivalent in exchange, sometimes described as a proto-money. Nearby, the prehistoric salt production center at Provadia Solnitsata is repeatedly linked, by Bulgarian archaeological writing and broader scholarship, to the region's prosperity and the rise of complex social structures. The idea is simple. Salt production supports trade, trade supports specialization, specialization supports leadership and hierarchy, hierarchy demands symbols, and gold, because it doesn't corrode and catches the eye, becomes the perfect material for status and ritual. Even the gold question loops back to networks. One study notes that the origins of Varna's gold remain partly unanswered, suggesting that what mattered most may not have been a single local gold source, but a system capable of pulling valued materials into one place and turning them into power. But Varna isn't only about trade. It's about skill. Making gold objects, thousands of them, means someone knew how to work metal precisely, repeatedly, and with aesthetic control. Peer-reviewed archaeometallurgical work treats the Varna cemetery as a key data set for the invention and early development of gold metallurgy in Southeast Europe, emphasizing that the objects reflect real technical expertise, fine metalworkers, not accidental dabblers. Here is the important nuance. Gold is rare, but it's also workable. Unlike iron, you don't need extreme furnaces just to shape it. You can hammer it, roll it, pierce it, turning small quantities into visually overwhelming displays. That makes gold unusually powerful as a social signal. It converts controlled access into visible authority. Museum interpretation also stresses that many Varna gold objects function as attributes of status, sacral and symbolic, not merely personal wealth. So in the Varna story, metallurgy is not a side plot. It's the mechanism by which a society turns materials into meaning, meaning that can be buried, displayed, and remembered. Varna's cemetery captures a peak moment, an experiment in hierarchy, trade, and prestige that is visible because it was sealed in graves. But it also raises the hardest question: what happened after? Some Bulgarian archaeological interpretation links the region's late Chalcolithic transformation to environmental stress, heat, and drought contributing to social disruption and shifts in settlement patterns, though the exact causal chain remains debated and should be treated as unspecified without a single consensus narrative. What is not debated is the legacy. Varna forces us to widen our definition of civilization. The cemetery shows that complex social organization and intensive prestige economies can arise outside the usual textbook centers, and that Europe's prehistoric communities were capable of sophisticated craft, long-distance exchange, and institutionalized status far earlier than many people assume. Even today, the archaeological story is still incomplete. The site has seen renewed excavation efforts in recent years, with the museum reporting additional graves investigated after work resumed. Another reminder that Varna is not a solved mystery, but an active research frontier. And that is why the world's oldest worked gold being found in Bulgaria isn't a trivia fact. It's a reset button on how we imagine the first layers of inequality, power, and craftsmanship in human history. Varna's gold predates kingdoms, but it already speaks the language of power, trade, specialization, hierarchy, and belief. And it was found here, on the Bulgarian coast, because this region was tied to one of prehistoric Europe's most valuable engines of wealth, the exchange networks built around salt. That is what makes Varna so important. It is not just an early gold treasure. It is evidence that inequality, authority, and symbolic power were already taking shape here 6.5 millennia ago. If you want more stories where archaeology overturns familiar assumptions, subscribe and tell me which ancient first we should investigate next.